Welcome to Bedtime Histories, stories of the past, told softly for the present. Settle in, close your eyes. Let's drift through time together. London, 1666. A spark, no larger than the flame of a candle, will soon consume an entire city. Wooden houses, narrow streets, and a restless wind waiting to wake. This is the story of how one quiet night turned into 4 days of fire, and how from the ashes a new London was born. London was alive then, more than 500,000 people living shoulder to shoulder, in timber houses stacked so close their rooftops almost touched. The streets were narrow, so narrow that neighbors could reach out and shake hands across the upper windows of their homes. Wooden beams blackened with soot, thatch still used on the poorer roofs, bakeries and tallow chandlers keeping the air thick with scent and smoke. The city hummed in its own rhythm, the bells of St. Paul's Cathedral marking the hours, the cries of fishmongers by the river, the faint murmur of alehouses still open late. And beneath it all, a quiet fragility. London was beautiful, but dry, built of oak, laced with tar, warmed by flame. It had burned before. It would burn again. In the early hours of Sunday, the 2nd of September, a baker named Thomas Farriner closed his shop on a small street called Pudding Lane. He lived above his bakery with his family and servants. That night, a spark, no larger than the flame of a candle, fell into a pile of wood shavings near the oven. No one saw it. No one heard it. But by 1 in the morning, the bakery glowed orange from within. The fire took to the walls first, then the rafters, then the roof. The wind that had slept all week began to stir, curling around corners, feeding the newborn blaze. When the family escaped through an upstairs window to the roof next door, the lane below was already a tunnel of fire. A neighbor ran to wake the Lord Mayor, Sir Thomas Bloodworth. He looked at the blaze and shrugged. "Pish," he said. "A woman could piss it out." But the wind kept rising. By dawn, London's eastern sky was glowing. The wind turned fierce, carrying burning embers from house to house. The fire leapt across streets, crawled under doors, and danced along wooden gutters like a living thing. People woke to shouting and the smell of smoke. Some threw buckets of water, hopeless against the wind. Others loaded carts and fled toward the river, their faces lit by the shifting gold of the flames behind them. The fire spread westward, devouring Fish Street Hill, Gracechurch Street, Lombard Street. The great warehouses by the river, filled with oil, tallow, tar, and hemp, became fountains of fire. By noon, the blaze had become a storm. The heat was so fierce it melted church bells and cracked stones apart. People said the very air seemed to burn. The wind carried burning ash across the Thames, and for a moment, even Southwark seemed to glow red. From the Tower of London, soldiers watched helplessly as the city's heart became a sea of flame. The fire raged for days. It moved like a tide, advancing, retreating, advancing again. Cheapside, Newgate, Ludgate Hill. Street after street fell, wood to ash, glass to sand, lead to molten rivers. On Tuesday, the 5th of September, the flames reached St. Paul's Cathedral, the proud stone giant at the centre of London. Inside, books and manuscripts had been stored for safety, piled high among wooden scaffolds. When the fire reached it, the heat was so intense that the great lead roof ran down the streets like water. Witnesses said the stones of the cathedral exploded like gunfire, and through the haze, one could see the wooden beams twist and fall, sending sparks 100 feet into the air. The sky itself seemed aflame, red, gold, white, like dawn and dusk had come together and refused to leave. By Wednesday morning, the wind began to fall still. Rain clouds gathered. The fire had burned through 4/5 of the old city. More than 13,000 houses, 87 churches, and 44 livery halls lay in ruin. The ground steamed, timbers smouldered, and London was silent. The air was thick with smoke and ash, soft flakes drifting down like dark snow. Families wandered the ruins, some carrying what little they had saved: a Bible, a chair, a silver cup blackened by heat. Along the river, boats rocked gently against the embers' reflection. No one spoke loudly. The fire had taken not only homes, but sound itself. In the weeks that followed, the city began to move again. Tents and wooden huts rose along the fields of Moor and Finsbury. Bells were recast, markets reopened, and the hum of London returned. Slower, quieter, wiser. From the ashes came new plans. Streets were widened, buildings ordered to be built from brick and stone. A man named Christopher Wren presented visions of domes and spires, a city reborn from flame. It would take 50 years to rebuild, but what rose from the ashes was a London of grandeur, a city of strength. The Great Fire destroyed much, but it also cleared what plague and poverty had left behind. The old wooden maze of medieval London gave way to the city that still stands today. Sometimes change begins in destruction, and sometimes the fire that consumes is the same fire that forges anew. So when you walk through London now, past the stone of St. Paul's, past the monument that marks the fire's beginning, past the river that carried the light, remember that once this whole city burned, and from its silence a new heartbeat began. Part 2. Echoes of the Fire. When the flames finally fell quiet, London stood in silence. What had been a city of 500,000 souls was now a landscape of stone and ash. Streets where families had lived for generations were gone, replaced by long shadows and smoke that lingered for days. But from that silence came stories, and voices that still speak to us more than 3 centuries later. One of those voices was that of Samuel Pepys, a man who kept a diary so vivid that it still breathes life into that week of fire. He wrote that the heat was so fierce, that lead ran down the streets in streams, that people stayed in their homes until the fire itself touched their walls. Then, barefoot, they ran to the river, clutching what little they could carry, and watched their city burn from the water. Pepys described how the sky itself turned red, how boats filled the Thames, and how by the 4th day, London was nothing but a glowing heap. Another man, John Evelyn, wrote of the same scene. He called it a miserable and calamitous spectacle. He walked through what was once Cheapside, and said the ruins were so vast and strange that he could not tell where he stood. But the story of the fire wasn't just told in words. It was shaped by the rumors that followed. In the days after, Londoners searched for someone to blame. Some said the fire was started by the Dutch or the French, England's rivals at the time. A watchmaker named Robert Hubert confessed to the crime, claiming he was a foreign spy. He was hanged, though records later showed He hadn't even arrived in London until after the fire began. It was fear and anger and grief, all looking for a target. The real truth was much simpler. A spark, a city built of wood, and a wind that wouldn't rest. The fire burned for 4 days, from the 2nd to the 6th of September, 1666. It destroyed more than 13,000 houses, 87 parish churches, and St. Paul's Cathedral itself. The heat melted the bells. The lead from the roof ran like rivers, and yet somehow the number of recorded deaths was only 6. Though historians believe many more perished unseen, their names lost in the ashes. When the smoke cleared, London began the slow work of rebirth. Tents and wooden huts filled the open fields outside the city walls. Merchants set up market stalls in the ruins, and out of the wreckage, plans for a new London began. The architect, Christopher Wren, sketched bold ideas for wide avenues and stone buildings. A city less flammable, more ordered, more prepared for what time and nature might bring. The London we know today, its skyline of domes and spires, is the child of that fire. It's strange to think that a single spark, smaller than a candle flame, that could remake a whole world. But that's how history often moves. Quietly, unexpectedly, through moments no one notices at first. A dropped ember, a change of wind, and suddenly the world is never quite the same again. And perhaps that's the true legacy of the Great Fire. Not destruction, but renewal. Not loss, but the chance to begin again. And so, London rose once more. From ash, from silence, from the stubborn will to rebuild. If you walk the streets today, past Pudding Lane, past St. Paul's, past the river that carried so many away, you'll still feel its heartbeat, the rhythm of a city that refused to die. This has been Bedtime Histories, the Great Fire of London, the night the city burned and was reborn. May your thoughts rest gently, and your dreams carry you into quieter times. Good night.